Who is that guy? Whoa. You're giving my eulogy, man. I'll tell you that. Whoa. Okay, first things first. Stand up. Get it loose, please. Okay, I'm dying sitting down there for all that. Okay. Now this is where we have to get into the Madeline Hunter. Okay, we really got to monitor and adjust because I didn't know we were going to hear so many talks. I'm really, really sick of hearing about implementation. Okay. It's not about the implementation. I don't care what standards you have when the tests become the standards. Okay, so it doesn't make any difference. Whatever is in front of you is a test, that de facto those become the standards, and that's what's happened. But that being aside, there's a whole lot wrong with the standards. We know that they're backmapped, they're developmentally inappropriate, and we could go on and have a whole meeting on that, but I just wish they were here in order for me to respond to that and to respond to some of the other comments. I'm tired, sick and tired of hearing about that there's no money and that we can't afford to do A, B, and C. It's all a matter of priorities, and you heard from Rosemary and others about how we have decided that we're not going to tax those who have the money, okay? So the money is there, it's just a matter of who we value. We value the rich. We don't value children. So I'm tired of hearing that axe. I'm also tired, this is not part of my speech, but when I hear this stuff, I'm also very tired of hearing about how much we spend per pupil in New York State, and that it's more than anyone else, and that Rochester City Schools, how much we spend in Rochester City Schools. Okay, so let's straighten that nonsense out, okay? We have a very large special education population. We have a very large English language learner population. I want you to know that in Fairport, we send one of our special education children to a special program in Rochester, and I want you to know what it costs to educate that one child. $100,000. Now you want to take, and this program is we're the only Fairport kid in that program. It's all city kids. If you have 10 kids in there, do the math, Joe. That's $1 million for 10 kids. I'm tired of hearing this stuff. When you disaggregate for poverty, it's not only the city schools that do well, it's all schools that do well when you disaggregate for poverty. But we don't want to do that because that isn't a good soundbite. I'm tired of those. So, now that we've normalized relations with Cuba, okay, I thought, in the last couple of weeks, I've written a few things, and a couple of these things have gone viral. So I thought, well, we've normalized relations. Maybe I'll write something and I'll post something, and maybe they'll get it. The leaders in Cuba will get it. So I posted this last week. Dear President Raul Castro of the Republic of Cuba, I understand that Governor Cuomo will be visiting your country in April. While I understand that you and your brother Fidel have been fairly adroit at squashing public expression and dictating every aspect of society, I ask that you listen to Andrew Cuomo, as he is truly the master of autocracy. the wizard of bullying the populace and a veritable ninja when it comes to avoiding problems of corruption. While I know you have great skills in these areas, you and your brother Fidel, I can guarantee you that Andrew has achieved master class status. Yours truly, Bill Cala. I make no apologies for anything that I'm going to say today. All right, I don't. Unlike some of the others, I'm sorry. I have no faith in the legislature whatsoever. But that doesn't mean that we can't accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. So I'll just refresh your memory if you were around in 2003 when one school said we weren't going to put our budget up because the legislature 20 years in a row didn't pass a budget. We couldn't get it. 700 school districts. We sent out 700 letters to every other school district in the state. They all said, oh yeah, good idea, let's do it. Why don't you do that? We support you, but we don't think we can do that. But the one school district said we're not going to put our vote up. And by the way, this is what we should be doing right now. Every school district in New York State should simply say, we're not going to put our budget up for vote. That collapses everything. So as you know, the rest was history. What we told them we weren't going to put the budget vote up, they blinked. They delayed the vote 2 weeks until they had a budget. So it's the power of one. The power of one. How much more powerful if the rest of us do something? There's another sign of hope. A couple of months ago, the commissioner said that he tried to slip in some legislation about mandating field tests, standalone field tests, right? So, again, we went crazy. And what we did is we basically informed our people that we're going to write the regents and tell them that we're not going to take them anyway, even if you mandate this. And they got inundated, buried. What happened? They blinked. They pulled it. There's no standalone field tests. Last Saturday, I went to the Little and saw a movie, To Light a Candle. I don't know if any of you have seen this. It's about the problem with education in Iran. And there are a group of people in Iran who are fighting the government. They've been persecuted for years. The Baha'is have been persecuted for years. And the Baha'is actually have developed an underground university to educate themselves. So I was very moved by this film, this documentary, and I had some takeaways at the end. Of course, how could we help the people of Iran? But then I reflected about how repressive their government is and how much it looks like what's happening here. How we're losing our freedom. Now, I've been a teacher since 1970, so I've been doing this for over 44 years, and I can tell you that when I was in the classroom in 1970, I had academic freedom. I was able to design my own lessons. I was able to hear and see and feel what my students needed and wanted and was able to do it. I didn't have to have anybody tell me how I was supposed to do it or what I was supposed to do. So what we have in Iran is very similar. As many of you know, we work in Kenya. Again, it's a national curriculum, a national test, and they're about ready to revolt. We're gravitating towards what people have done for years, and it's failed. We're looking at third world solutions for 21st century America. That's what we're doing right now. And to make it worse, just last week, to give you the direction of where this country is going. You know what happened in Oklahoma last week? Their legislature voted to ban the teaching of AP history. Why? Why? You would die. Why? Why? Why did they do this? Because it was too critical of the government. Are you kidding me? Why is this happening? And you've heard many comment on this today. It's happening, it's all because of power and that which fuels the power, money. There was some, it was alluded to the hedge funders, okay? Well, let's get just exactly specific as to, because we heard hedge fund like maybe 4 or 5 times today. But now let me just pinpoint it for you. Thanks to a little discussed law passed in 2000 at the end of Bill Clinton's presidency, banks, equity firms, and hedge funders were able to, this law enabled these people to invest in charter schools. And if they invested, now this only applies to charter schools, they get a 39% tax credit. Now, what that means is that their money is doubled in 7 years. Now, this all will start will make sense to you as to why we're in the boat that we're in. It's all about money. So your money doubles in 7 years if you're a hedge funder, okay? But it doesn't end there. Rich donors throughout the world are now sending money, this is outside of the United States, to fund our charter schools. Why? Because if they invest $500,000 or more to charters under a federal program called EB-5, they're allowed to purchase immigration visas for themselves and family members, yet another mechanism in place to ensure that the money keeps rolling in. Now, I don't know about you, about secure investments. We just did some new CDs. Those are secure. You know, it's not like going in the stock market and gambling, okay? These things, this 39%, it's secure. I don't know about you, but we just put our money into CDs and got 1.4%, okay? That's pretty big, huh? 1.4%. That's the security that common people get. But if you're a hedge funder, you got 39% tax credit. So something's desperately wrong here. So any questions why charters are so popular? Any question? You know, even though there is absolutely, you heard the statistics tonight, there's 2 Stanford studies, 2 Credo studies, by the way, done by charter supporters that show that only 17% of them do better than regular public schools. Most of them do worse. But you have to keep that going. You have to have charters because you have to have that investment. I need that tax credit. Money cures conscience. So, the destruction of public schools is a cash cow for the Cook brothers, the Koch brothers, the Walton family, Bill Gates, Eli Broad, and the precious few of the rest of the 1%. In 2014, just this past year, the richest 8 Americans increased their wealth by more than $87 billion. 8 Americans increased their wealth by that much. And I heard about we don't have enough money in New York State, all right? Well, that $87 billion is pretty much the operating budget of New York State. 22 billion of that, 92 billion, and 22 billion of that was spent on education. But apparently we have enough money. We have enough money to feed those 8 people. It's all about money, the billions of dollars that are being made on the backs of our children. The game has been rigged for years. Now, our recent commissioners of education and our plutocrat chancellor, Merrill Tisch, are beholden to the 1%. Make no mistake about that. So the people who are directing our educational system are beholden to the plutocrats, to the 1% who are making all of this money. And it's really part of a very well-organized plan to make sure that public schools are declared failures, and then we dissolve them, and then we go to charters, and then I'm able to invest more money so that I could make my money back in 7 years, double it in 7 years. So with each new commissioner comes a different claim. So here's how the game works. So we had Tom Sobel, who was actually a good commissioner. And then a schmuck, Richard Mills, comes in. And Richard Mills declares that, oh, we weren't doing well enough. Let's develop some tests. So we do that, and we come up with a whole line of tests, and slowly but surely they change the cut score every year, and we get to a point where actually the scores are halfway decent. So Richard Mills comes in and says, Tom Sobel, low standards. Then we get to a point, as I said with Richard Mills, about 80% of the kids are passing the test. And then David Steiner comes in. David Steiner comes in and said, oh, those test scores are so inflated. You guys aren't really doing well. You guys aren't college and career ready. We're going to rescale the tests. So when Steiner came in, they rescaled the tests. And so that 80% dropped magically. Well, I guess all you have to do is change the metric, and voila, we're failing. So then Steiner is commissioner for, I think, 11 minutes. He leaves, and then we come in with John King. By the way, we won't get into the story of that, a very close friend of Merrill Tisch, another plutocrat, okay? So he comes in, and we have a whole new battery of tests. So in 1 year, we went from 80% of our kids passing to 37%. Man, did we get dumb. In 1 year, but we had to prove a point. Public schools are failing. You can't have 80% of our kids pass if public schools are failing. So it's rigged. The game's rigged, no matter what you do. And look, anytime you determine the passing score after the test is given. I mean, come on. Are you kidding me? It's rigged. So what do you think, by the way, if you're in the city of Rochester, what if just magically all of your kids passed next year? What do you think would happen? Well, I'll tell you one thing. They're not going to pat you on the back. Number one, they're going to say, you're cheated. The test was too darn easy. So you're going to hear the same thing over and over again, because this is exactly what's happened over and over again for decades, over and over again. So it would never happen, by the way. No way will all kids pass the test, because that's the design. And if you know anything about test design, which I do, and about the companies who design the tests, is that in the metrics of developing the tests, they eliminate the questions that kids do well on. And they eliminate the questions that minority kids do well on. So if minority kids are screwed, I mean, just from the top to the bottom, because in those in the test sampling, if too many of the kids get the questions right, they throw the questions out of the mix. I know that for a fact. Pretty scary. So you have all of these characters come in, and I could only think of The Who with Roger Daltrey, right? Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. But hopefully we learn a little lesson after that and remember the rest of the refrain of the song, we won't be fooled again. We won't be fooled again. If we're fooled again, we deserve to be beaten up. So, how often have we heard, we have all of these groups that are supposed to represent us in D.C. and in Albany. You know, there's the School Boards Association, there's the AFT, there's the NEA, there's SANES, there's NISCUS, there's the UFT, and then there's us. And how often do we hear when we go to them and say, you got to bail us out. This is killing us. And then the people at the top of those organizations say, wait a minute, we need our place at the table, right? We need our place we don't want to lose our place at the table with the governor or with Arnie Duncan as Secretary of Education in DC. We don't want to lose our place at the table. Let me clarify this. We've always been at the table. We've always been at the table because we've been the dinner. We've been eaten alive. We have been the main course. That's how we've been at the table. So all of that, we got to be at the table. I don't buy it. I've lost my faith in the legislative system by a lot of what you heard tonight. Because a lot of what you heard tonight was insulting. It insulted me. We've been told that we have to negotiate with Cuomo. Okay, so now he puts out this plan, 50% of this. So what's going to happen? Is it going to be 40? Or what? Wait a minute. There's nothing, absolutely nothing in the plan that he proposed, nothing that has any value for children, for teachers, for public education, for communities. Absolutely nothing. It's all harmful. It's not an opportunity agenda. It's an opportunistic money grab. That's all it is. We could never negotiate with people who can't be trusted and who don't keep their promises. Cuomo made a promise to the Working Families Party before the election. I think if you paid attention, you knew that. After the election, he broke those promises. Cuomo made promises about APPR. What he said was, we're going to put it on hold for 2 years. I want you, the legislature, to come up with a bill to put it on hold for 2 years. You know why I want you to put it on hold for 2 years? Because those tests are such garbage that we're not going to have those tests put on student records, right? They're going to put on student records. Those tests are such crap that they're not going to be on student records, okay? That Common Core, how terrible, right? Yeah, okay. So what happens? You know what happened after the election, don't you? He vetoed his own bill. He vetoed the bill he asked to have produced because he didn't have to answer. He got elected now. Now I'm going to stick you. He's in the process. Cuomo promised to fight corruption by creating the Moreland Commission. Okay? When the investigation got close to his buddy Sheldon, and it got close to him, goodbye Moreland Commission. Before the election, he promised to reduce the significance of testing. After the election, he increased the stakes for state testing to exponential levels. Here's some, before the election, Cuomo took I have the whole list of the donors. Before the election, Cuomo took $1.6 million in campaign contributions from charter supporters. Now, here's breaking news. I think I have some breaking news for you. Yesterday, reported in the International Business Times, it was reported that Cuomo took $5 million in hedge fund money for his campaign. International Business Times, yesterday, okay? Hedge fund, heard that word again? Hedge fund equals charters. So after the election, in his new budget, you heard how there's no money for public schools, right? We can't give you the $2.2 billion because we're too busy stirring the drinks of the rich, okay? All right? So after the election, he increased special charter school aid and I didn't hear this at all tonight, which was interesting, by 21%. Guess what? No strings attached. You know that public schools, in order for them to get any money, right, you got to buy his agenda. Charters don't have to do anything. I'm giving you a 20% increase in your special aid. And of course, you know there was more to it than that. He also is proposing, well, if we're almost at the charter cap. Now, how can I invest my $500,000 and get if I got a cap on charters? I gotta increase the cap by 100. So that's where that's at. Before the election, the governor signed tax break legislation that benefited WorldCore, his Rupert Murdoch company. After the election, Cuomo signs a $700,000 book contract with the same company. His response, quote, "I didn't know they would benefit from this legislation." I know, did Henny Youngman write that line? I mean, you gotta be kidding. All right? There are only two possible conclusions that you could come to with that line. Two, right? Number one, you're either negligent, or two, you're corrupt. Only two. I'll stop shortly because the list is endless, okay? Last week it was made public that all of his emails in his administration would be automatically purged after 90 days. So if they were older than 90 days, all of his administration emails are to be purged. He already started doing it, by the way. So now there's a check. Is that legal? Well, if King Andrew says it's legal, it's legal. So he goes ahead and he does it. Now, this is unheard of in the public sector. If we did this, they'd lock us up. All right? So, if you had nothing to hide, knowing how close Preet Bharara is to him, right now, the U.S. attorney, I would have stopped that process, right? If you had nothing to hide? If you had nothing to hide, you'd stop and say, hey, wait a minute, I got nothing to hide. I'm not going to erase any more emails. He'd say, well, it's efficiency. That was its efficiency. So let's make something perfectly clear. We don't negotiate with those that don't keep promises and treat truth as a foreign language. If any of you are into House of Cards, Andrew is Frank Underwood. Now, if you want to do a little research, go to season 1, episode 3, because that's when they're doing the education bill. Oh my gosh, I'm watching that and I'm going, life imitates art. Unbelievable, but so believable. So this is our government. This is New York State. Martin Luther King said that our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. This is not the time to demur to unbridled power and tyranny. It's time to speak truth to power. We can't be silent anymore. We just can't. Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, silence in the face of evil is itself evil. God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. We know what and with whom we are dealing. Let's talk about what should be done to address the root cause of poor school performance, this tragedy of generational poverty that's crippling the future of our children. Paul Krugman, on the 23rd of February, published an editorial called "Knowledge Isn't Power," which is quite interesting, isn't it? I quote, whatever serious people may want to believe, soaring inequality isn't about education. It's about power. Just to be clear, he goes on, I'm in favor of better education. Education's a friend of mine, and it should be available and affordable for all. But what I keep seeing is people insisting that educational failings are at the root of still weak job-creating, stagnating wages and rising inequality. This sounds serious and thoughtful, but it's actually a view very much at odds with the evidence, not to mention a way to hide from the real, unavoidable partisan debate. While the education and inequality story may once have seemed plausible, it hasn't tracked for reality in a long time. He goes on to say, there's a lot we could do to redress this inequality of power. We could levy higher taxes on corporations and the wealthy. I think you've heard that. And if I'm going to put my money in anybody, it's going to be in Paul Krugman. He's a Nobel laureate, okay? So this guy knows what he's talking about and really sets us on a path of what the kinds of things that we can do that actually make a difference for children in this world. We could raise the minimum wage. We could make it easier for workers to organize. And just as an aside, Cuomo's going to do this whole thing. He wants to raise the minimum wage, and he wants to destroy unions. So it's like, let me try to figure that one out, okay? Okay, I want to raise your wages, I want to take all your benefits away. I want to raise your wages, and I want to take away your security. This is just this is another Cuomo soundbite. It's like okay. This is my dabbling at liberalism. Yeah, I believe in gay marriage. Yeah, okay, that's nice. Now what else do you do? Why I believe in crushing people. We could raise the minimum wage and we could make it easier for workers to organize. But given the determination to move policy in exactly the opposite direction, advocating such an effort makes you sound partisan. Hence the desire to see the whole thing as an educational problem instead. But we should recognize that popular evasion for what it is, according to Paul Krugman, a deeply serious fantasy. We know what our children, we know why our children don't learn. In Rochester, we know why our children don't learn in this country. We know why they don't do well. We know about violent neighborhoods. We know about chronic illnesses. We know about child abuse. We know about domestic violence. We know about poor health. We know about teen pregnancy, and some of these, by the way, in Rochester are the highest in the country, if not in the Western world. We know about toxic stress. We know about the lack of books in homes. We know about parents who are unable to read to their children. It's called poverty. The elephant in the room that no one cares to approach. Rochester has the terrible distinction, the unfortunate distinction of being the poorest city in the country by measures of extreme poverty. I direct you to the report by the Rochester Area Community Foundation and the work of Ed Doherty. I sat through a lecture yesterday morning. It's frightened by Ed. Very, very frightening. The statistics are just unbelievable. So what must we do as a society to ensure success for all of our students? So these are things that we need to do. So we have the Krugman issues. We have to raise the wages. We have to tax the rich. We have to tax the corporations. But there are an awful lot of other things that we can do and need to do and should do. We must support evidence-based programs like Nurse-Family Partnership. We have to invest in the adequate and affordable child care. We have to insist on UPK for all children. Now, we heard that before tonight, but I'm going to go one step further. We need UPK for all children beginning at age 3. Not 4, 3. We need better health care for the poor. We need to deconcentrate poverty. We heard that. We need to deconcentrate poverty. We need to regionalize schooling by school populations by socioeconomic status. We need to break up that monopoly. That's not a really good monopoly to have concentrated poverty. We must provide safe and affordable housing in the suburbs, giving urban children access to suburban schools. And by the way, wherever I go talk, so how did we get all this concentrated poverty? The suburbs are basically to blame. It's like when you have laws that exclude people because of the cost of the housing, you're part of the problem. We must insist upon fighting teen pregnancies by implementing evidence-based programs such as assisting and rehabilitating kids, becoming a responsible teen, Children in Society's Carrera program, Project Talc, Raising Healthy Children, Sisters Saving Sisters. Heard of any of these? Of course not. You haven't heard of those because there's no money to be made in them. They just solve the problem. They're all evidence-based. We must combat child abuse, and child abuse in Rochester is some of the highest in the country. While the rest of the country's rate has gone down, ours has gone up. We have to combat it by programs such as SBM, school-based mentoring, community-based mentoring, functional family therapy, the good behavior game. Heard of those? Of course not. They cost money. They don't make money for millionaires. We must provide door-to-door transportation for our urban children. If we're to adequately provide safe arrival and dismissals from school, we have to have door-to-door transportation. You know, we do it in the suburbs, but apparently the urban kids aren't worth as much. You know, their safety isn't worth as much, apparently. We don't have enough money. I'm sick of hearing it. We should dedicate our entire communities to building positive assets in our children through evidence-based programs such as that in the Search Institute. Maybe we could look at the 48 pages I left the city in 2008 on all suggestions of what to do, which has been, I left it with the city, the DNC, the Rochester City School District. It's been patently ignored because it all takes effort. It all takes effort. Not a lot of it takes money. And this leads me to what I want for all of our children, rich or poor, urban or suburban. I want the same kind of schools that President Obama sends his girls to. That's what I want for everybody. You know, the Sidwell Friends, they send, I want our kids, every kid of color, every kid of poverty to be able to attend that kind of school. You know, that kind of school that doesn't have standardized tests? That kind of school that doesn't have Common Core? That's the kind of school I want for all of our kids. I want the same kind of schools. I want the same kind of schools where public school basher Michael Bloomberg sent his daughters, the prestigious Spence schools in Manhattan. Wait a minute, no standardized tests, no Common Core. I want the same kind of schools that APPR and Common Core enforcer John King sends his kids to, which would be the Woodland Hill Montessori schools where there is no Common Core and there are no high-stakes tests. So these are the people. These are the people who are making the decisions about our kids, but hell, I'm not sending my kids to those. Now, I want to tell you that John King lives in the Bethlehem School District. My grandkids go to the Bethlehem schools. I keep on saying that Pennsylvania thing. Yeah. In Delmar. Bethlehem schools are awesome. They're great schools, but they're not good enough for John King's kids. I just don't get that. Let's remind the governor and everyone else that uses education as the scapegoat for a heartless and uncaring and avaricious agenda that while teaching our children the content, they need to be successful in our public schools. We teach them compassion. We teach them respect. We teach them to be creative. We teach them resilience. We teach them tolerance. We teach them cooperation. We teach them problem solving. We teach them to be good people. We teach them to be good citizens. We teach them to discover their own talents. We teach them to save and respect the earth. And most importantly, we teach them to love and be loved. I want Governor Cuomo to figure out the APPR score for that. And finally, we teach our children democracy. Democracy is not compliance with the laws that are harmful and downright evil. Democracy means having a meaningful voice. We can be silent no more. Frederick Douglass said, "I prayed for freedom for 20 years, but received no answer until I prayed with my legs." Last Thursday, we prayed with our legs. We have to pray with our actions. That's the only thing that's going to get something done. Our silence must be broken. not only with words, but with action. That's why we rally. That's why we march. I'm tired of hearing that it's the law. Look who made these laws. These laws were made by fallible white men. That's who these laws were made by. And what if we didn't have Rosa Parks? Rosa Parks broke the law. She prayed with her legs, as did an entire city for nearly a year, to put an end to injustice. The laws governing our schools are no less evil. Our schools are more segregated than in 1954 at the time of Brown versus Board of Education. Our country gets poorer and poorer each year, and our schools are inadequately funded. Rochester is the poorest city in extreme poverty in the United States. Our current laws and proposed laws expect that the most noble of professions, teaching, is to work the miracle of what decades of institutional, governmental, and societal neglect and racism have foisted upon the most vulnerable among us, our children, our future. Make no mistake that the laws governing education are feeding the school-to-prison pipeline. I hope we didn't need John Legend at the Oscars to inform us that we have more black poor men in prison today than all of the people in captivity who were in slavery. I hope that wasn't the first that we heard of that. It's time to speak up, but more importantly, it's time for action. It's time to walk. Now, you could interpret that any way you want, but it's time to walk. And if that means saying no, if that means striking, if that means refusing, that's what it has to be. When you have laws that are immoral, when you have laws that hurt, when you have laws that damage precious lives, it's time to walk. So in closing on this long evening, number one, I thank you for lasting it out. Okay, I'm so ADD that it's very difficult for me to sit as long as I sat down there, believe me. So kudos to all of you. William Faulkner said, "Never be afraid to raise your voice for honesty and truth and compassion against injustice and lying and greed. If people all over the world would do this, it would change the earth. We can be silent no more." Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Cala, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for coming. Drive home safely and attend all the future forums scheduled. Together, at the end of this agenda that is being imposed,